So now is the time. Now is the time, and this is the moment. There is no other moment. Isn't it great to know that at this moment we can rise into greatness? And as I was sitting with that topic, rising into greatness, I was thinking of the metaphor of a cake. And I've been watching the Great British Bake Off. If you haven't watched it, it's so amazing. So I've learned all kinds of things about what it takes to make the perfect cake. Right? And what is the key to this conversation is everything that's in the dough already exists that will become the cake. All the ingredients are already in the dough, but eating dough is not the same as eating cake. Now, eating cookie dough is pretty good. We even have ice cream now that's cookie dough, right? But it needs to be fully formed. And so, it's one thing to come here on a Sunday morning or to come to a class and really understand, oh, it's all within me. Every ingredient for my own greatness already exists within me. Knowing that is a powerful moment, that surrender, because there is only one surrender. And that surrender is knowing the deepest truth of who and what we are. And when that surrender happens, everything changes, except that's the first step. That's what I've been sitting with. I've been recognizing that just because I have the ingredients within me, as Michael Beckwith says, the spiritual blueprint within each one of us to live our most magnificent life, doesn't mean that I have the conditions. I've created the conditions for that consciousness to rise and therefore express. I didn't know what proving or being proved. Does anyone know that? That's a baker. Yeah. That just means the dough has to sit for a certain amount of time, I think in the refrigerator. And it has to sit there for a while, and it has to blend perfectly in order for it to be ready to rise. So if we recognize that we have within us the blueprint for our most magnificent life, that we can rise into greatness, that is the beginning, but we don't take the dough out into the world. We take the time to be in the silence, to create the conditions that allow the dough to become one. Do you hear it? Yeah. The separate ingredients that we all have within us, the blueprint for our own magnificence, already exists. And as we spend time in the silence, it becomes one powerful blueprint for our own magnificence. But then we're not done. Then we gotta be in the oven for a while. Now, I've never baked a single thing. Oh, actually, that's not true. When I was a little boy, my sister had an easy bake oven. And so we used to bake lots of little cakes in there, but that's the extent, that's all I know about baking. But what I do know is putting the ingredients in the oven, it doesn't mean it's gonna rise perfectly. Right, like I went to a party not long ago and this poor guy was so distraught because his bread didn't rise. So just having the ingredients and putting it in the oven doesn't allow it to become its most magnificent expression. So as a metaphor, what I want to invite us to explore in this moment is what are those conditions where we spend time allowing those ingredients to become one, and then we put ourselves in the oven. What might the oven represent? It might represent that time. Look at the heat. It's got to heat up, right? That might be what we're doing in this room. Spiritual community is a place that can be seen as that oven where we come together and we heat it up, and then we allow ourselves to rise into our most magnificent expression. And then we're ready. Then we're ready to become that in the world. And here's the catch. Many of us don't recognize that it's already all within us. And when I forget the deepest truth of who and what I am, what am I doing? I'm looking to the world to bring that to me. What happens when I look to the world to bring me the ingredient that's already within me? I get disappointed. And that's why there's a popular phrase in our culture around unavailable people or toxic relationships. Right? Because I have forgotten who I am and I am looking to you to bring it to me. And guess what? No one can do that for me. And there's a paradox. Because if we didn't need each other, we wouldn't be sitting here. We would be at home watching YouTube and hearing these spiritual talks. There's something about coming together in community that's paradoxical. I alone must recognize that the ingredients are within me, and yet somehow community is what helps us rise to that greatness. So what I'm inviting in this moment is to start with the recognition that no one or no thing can ever bring me that which I've been seeking, because it's been here all along. We've had many, many master teachers on the planet. I gave a talk not long ago that I said we have master teachers among us. We have master teachers in this room, and someone came up to me afterward and said, "Can you give me the names of all those master teachers that are in the room? Because I want to touch them." I said, "No, you are the master teacher. We are each the most enlightened that we're ever going to be. So what do we want to do with that? I am enlightened. You are enlightened. What does it need in order to rise to that expression of that in the world?" And as Marianne Williamson so beautifully says, most of us are afraid of our own greatness. It's not my inadequacies that scare me the most. It's to recognize, as she said, that I am gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. Let's say that together. I am gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. One more time. I am gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. So I want to break something else down. There's a small s personality self, and there's the large S, or the capital S essential self. And when I'm talking about being gorgeous, talented, and fabulous, I'm not talking about the personality self only. Because it's nice to have it there as well. But it starts with recognizing that the essential, eternal truth is always infinite potential, infinite possibilities that exist. It's that dough. Every ingredient is in there. Every ingredient is in the acorn that creates the mighty oak. Yes. But it needs to go into the ground. We can't put it out in the sunshine and say, "Grow, tree." And that's what a lot of us want to do. That's what I wanted to do. I did that for the first decade I was in New Thought. I just wanted to be in the light. I want to be in the light. Why is it? It's not quite growing. Do you hear it? And there was a point in my journey that I recognized in order for me to grow the mighty oak as the metaphor of my own greatness, I was going to have to go within. And I was going to have to go into the soil, into the darkness, the dampness, those parts of ourselves that we might have abandoned. The metaphor here, it's not even really a metaphor, the practice here is to recognize what lives in this soil. Yes, nutrients live there. And also the shadow, which is those parts, the parts of myself that I've abandoned, the core beliefs I have about myself. The only thing that's preventing this dough from rising is a belief that I can't turn the oven to the right temperature. I don't have the right oven. If you knew my story, you would know why I can't be in my greatness. That's true for all of us. Because for whatever reason, and it's the great mystery, the great question mark, we come into this world as these beautiful spiritual beings, and then we get taught we're not that. Right. And we get taught, like I said in the beginning, when we step into our greatness, sometimes we get messages, don't be too great. I need you to stay small because your greatness is making me a little uncomfortable. But here's the great part of it, as Marianne Williamson said in the reading, when we step fully into our own light, it naturally gives others permission to do the same. That's the mission of Agape, to create a space where we can all rise together into our own greatness. And you know what? I imagine as an acorn, when that starts to sprout, it's probably painful. Why? Because there's a shell that's been created that wants to keep all that magnificence in. But there's another part of that acorn that knows it must break free. It must break free from the limitations, the ideas, the beliefs, the agreements we've made with mediocrity, so that we can come out into the sunshine and be the mighty oak. So that we can rise and be our most magnificent version of ourselves. Lao Tzu, over 2,500 years ago, said the greatest gift we can offer the world is that of our own transformation. What if I really know that? What if I truly recognize that the only thing that ever needs to change is my own awareness of who I really am? Nothing out there needs to change in order for me to be happy. No thing is ever going to bring me that which I believe I'm seeking. And I'm not even really seeking it. My personality self is, because we're all wanting what? Love and connection. All we really want is to be seen and to be witnessed and to know who we are. Because that's how we came into the world, and that's still there under all the stuff that we put on top of it. We've been watching The Blue Planet. It's really amazing. It's an amazing show, and there's this desert. I believe it's in Egypt. And there's an underground world that's one of the largest, if not the largest, underground lake in the world. And they didn't discover it until recently. They discovered it quite accidentally. Talk about a metaphor. Right above all of it, there's no water. No water. It's the driest place on earth. And yet when you go down into the ground, there's this vast lake with all this life that they didn't know existed. We have spent more time going into space than we have going into our own oceans, underground. Isn't that interesting? That's a representation that I might want to look up there or out there for the answer, when all along it's deep within each and every one of us. There's this great parable, it's a Hindu parable, where God is speaking of this, we're anthropomorphizing God for this story, that God is speaking to her, we're going to say her followers, and she's asking, where should I hide myself? I want to hide myself because I want people to have to seek and search, and then when they find me, it's such a much more beautiful experience that they've had this experience of not knowing me, and then they get to know me. And so they're saying, where should we hide ourselves? Under the ground, behind a tree, deep within the mountain. And God says, she said, no, I know where I'm going to put myself. I'm going to put myself within the heart of every person on the planet. That's the last place they'll think to look. So what I'm inviting as we move into this month, into this idea of embracing our own greatness, is to remember that we're not talking only about the personality self that has greatness, my talents, my abilities, my unique gifts. I'm talking about the ultimate greatness of who and what we are. That great remembering of coming home to ourselves. And when we're in the presence of someone who has come home to themselves, we feel it. And each one of us has the ability to come home to ourselves right in this moment, to remember who and what we are. What if it didn't need to be a process? Wouldn't that be cool? What if the only thing I ever needed in relationships, because in the workshop I talked about we're going to work in these 4 areas, relationships, money, physical health, and purpose, which by the way, I think is everything. Right? Those are the issues, right? Those are the issues that people are coming with. How do I learn to have more connected relationships? How do I learn to have more financial abundance? How do I really discover what's mine to do? How do I step more fully into my physical health? The answer is always the same. So here's the trick here. You ready? The process is exactly the same for every one of those. There's only this idea or this belief that I need to learn how to do this. And yet, paradoxically, maybe we need to learn how to do it. Because I remember going through all this stuff, right? 20 years of therapy and telling the story and retelling the story and retelling the story and retelling the story and retelling the story. And I have the privilege of working in the mental health field now, and I have the privilege on Friday of speaking to a group of therapists and clinicians and offering them the possibility that when I collude with the person's story, it concretizes the story. Now, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with therapy. I love therapy. It's been really, really great for me. And some therapists unconsciously collude with the story. Oh my gosh, you poor dear, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Right? So there's this place of witnessing. We're going to talk about the quantum field at this moment. We're going to talk about what happens when I see you as your wholeness. What happens when we sit down together and we reflect that back? Infinite possibilities. Because as Dr. Sue Morter said a few weeks ago when she was here so beautifully, life is energy and matter is compressed energy. In other words, to simplify that, when I focus on something, that's what we see. It doesn't really manifest, everyone. It was there. I just can see it now. I have opened to a new way of being and seeing. So quantum mechanics is showing us now that there are infinite possibilities, and when the observer looks for something, they find it. So what I want to ask is, how much are you loving that story? Loving that story. I think Michael Beckwith says, if I can just get people to forgive their parents, we can get started. We can move on. Right? I want to be clear for anyone who's here, anyone who's watching on Lovestream, if you have been sexually abused or if you've been verbally abused, we're not wanting to minimize that. I want to be really clear. We're not doing a spiritual bypass. That has created that small s personality. But you hear what I'm saying. It's the small s. It keeps us small. And the issue is, yes, maybe we can say I was victimized when I was little, but we unfortunately continue to give the person the power, and they might not even be on the planet. Right? They might not even be on the planet, and they're still holding power over me. Because they did this to me, it created this small s personality self. But in the midst of that, there is the powerful spiritual essence that no one can ever harm, no matter what. Nelson Mandela, how long did he sit in prison? And then he came out as his light. Right? So the invitation, as we close out this particular conversation together, is to recognize the power of the integration of these two selves. Because that's what I really want the takeaway to be. But it starts with knowing who and what I am essentially, that I'm unharmed and I'm unharmable, and I don't care what anyone has done to me, I can move beyond that story. I don't need to minimize it, I don't need to pretend like it didn't hurt, and I don't even need to say, oh, this isn't so easy, because you know what? Imagine that shell around that acorn. That's painful. It's painful shedding the story. And maybe it doesn't have to be. I'm going to speak for myself. It's been really painful letting go of all those stories. Right? Because there's something about them that I feel really safe and comfortable in my own victimness. It has felt really comfortable for me being small. Because going back to the reading, stepping into our greatness is a new frontier for many of us. And so this integration of the small s and the large S self, what I want to say about this, and this is what I'm going to close with, is when I absolutely know the deepest truth, this essential, infinite beingness, when I know that I know that I know, then I can take the small s and take it out of the driver's seat and put it into the passenger seat. And then I recognize that my unique gifts and talents and skills that live in the personality can become the vehicle for delivering spirit into the world. Helen's unique small s self is a beautiful voice. She gets to use that as her gift to bring spirit. But if she stands up here and just sings, we're not going to feel what we feel, because when she stands up here and sings, she's standing here as her large S spiritual self, this beautiful, infinite spiritual being, and then she's taking the gifts of her personality and delivering it to us, and something magical happens. Amen. In the atmosphere. And so as we move into this story of Easter, whether you're a Christian or not, you can take this story of as we're moving, next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and then moving into the Easter story. And I know Reverend Joan always has a beautiful way to deliver this story. For me right now, what we're looking at is how we go into consciously spending time in the silence, recognizing that everything is within us, and we can dedicate ourselves to being in that oven or in that soil, so that we can then sprout. We can then rise. And then we can use the personality to deliver our own unique gifts to the world. And that's when everything changes. Everything changes when I no longer need to reject the personality self. I no longer need to pretend I don't have a human experience. We've been saying for a long time that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I recognize the evolution that came from believing we were human beings having a spiritual experience. But I want to say it here, and I've said it before, and I want to say it again. what happens when we know that we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. That's what's happening in consciousness right now. There is no separation. What if everything that I called bad, or I need to work through this, or if I could just learn how to let go of this, I could be okay? Maybe there's a diagnosis that lives there. You know, how many of you have been diagnosed with something? As soon as we're diagnosed, you know, let me read about that. I was diagnosed as a Leo, right? When I was a little kid, I would read, right? How many people are diagnosed by their astrological sign? Right? I started reading about myself, and I'm like, oh, that's who I am. Oh, yeah, that's who I am. Oh, yeah, and then I became that, which has its gifts, because here I am up here being a Leo. But there is something way beyond that. Something way beyond that. We are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. And I'm sure that the moons and the stars and the planets do have something to do with this field that we call reality. Ultimately, though, it's really an inside job. So knowing that I know that I'm an infinite being of light, stepping fully into that, using my own unique gifts from my personality to deliver that into the world. Life is a great experiment. Are you ready to play with me in this field of infinite possibilities? So as we go out into the world, we recognize that we are here to be love, be light, and be joy. And so it is.